He walked into his mansion early one morning, and almost fainted when he saw his poor cleaner on her knees, crying over a dying plant he had thrown away. But what looked like a strange act of madness turned into a lesson that would change his life forever. He followed her, and discovered a secret so powerful, it shattered his pride and melted his cold heart. This is the story of a millionaire who thought he had everything, until a humble cleaner showed him what true wealth really means. It was one of those mornings when the sky looked heavy, and the air smelled like rain. Ethan Miller, a self-made millionaire with everything money could buy, mansions, cars, and fame, stepped out of his luxury car and walked toward his massive house. He wasn't supposed to be there. His business trip to Singapore had been cancelled due to a sudden storm, and he thought he'd take advantage of the rare chance to rest at home. As he unlocked the front door, a strange silence greeted him. Usually, by this time, his mansion buzzed with activity. His staff cleaning, his chef preparing breakfast, the sound of soft classical music echoing through the halls. But today, it was eerily quiet. He frowned. Was no one working? Then he heard something faint, a soft humming sound coming from the kitchen. Curious, Ethan walked slowly, his expensive shoes tapping lightly against the marble floor. When he turned the corner, the sight before him nearly made him lose his breath. There, on her knees, was Rosa, his cleaner. Her faded blue uniform was soaked with water, and her wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she held a small, broken flower pot. Ethan's brow furrowed. He recognized it instantly. It was the little plant he'd thrown out weeks ago, saying it didn't fit the decor. But Rosa wasn't cleaning. She was whispering to the wilted plant, gently pouring water from an old glass. "You've still got life in you," she murmured softly. "Just hold on, my little one. You'll bloom again." Ethan froze. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. He'd seen his employees do many things: dust, scrub, polish, but never something like this. There was such tenderness in her voice, such emotion in her face, that it made his chest tighten. She wiped her tears with the edge of her sleeve and smiled faintly at the fragile green leaves. "You just need someone to believe in you," she whispered. Again, Ethan's hand trembled as he gripped the wall. Something about those words struck deep. Believe in you. He realized he hadn't believed in anything but money for years. He quietly stepped back, not wanting her to see him. For the first time in his life, the millionaire felt poor, because he saw a kind of richness in Rosa that no amount of wealth could buy. Ethan couldn't shake off the image of Rosa on her knees, whispering to that dying plant. The entire day, her voice echoed in his mind. "You just need someone to believe in you." For a man who had built empires, who could buy anything with a single phone call, those words felt like a mirror reflecting the emptiness inside him. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his study, pretending to read financial reports, but his thoughts wandered back to Rosa. He picked up the intercom and called his assistant. "Julia," he said, trying to sound casual. "That cleaner, Rosa, how long has she been working for us?" Julia hesitated. "About 6 years, sir. She's one of our oldest and most loyal staff members. Never missed a single day, even when her daughter got sick." Ethan looked up. "Her daughter?" "Yes," Julia replied softly. "She has a teenage daughter. The poor woman's been battling cancer for a long time. Rosa works extra hours to pay the hospital bills. She even cleans other houses after leaving here." Ethan leaned back in his chair, silent. 6 years under his roof, and he had never known a single thing about her life. He realized that while he spent his days chasing profits, someone right in front of him was fighting a real battle with no glory, no applause, just love and determination. The next morning, he arrived early again this time, intentionally. From the hallway, he quietly observed Rosa as she worked. She moved slowly but with purpose. Every item she dusted, every corner she cleaned, it was like she respected the place, even though it wasn't hers. Then he noticed something that surprised him. On the counter, she carefully packed small containers with leftover food, bread, soup, and fruits. She wrapped them neatly in a cloth bag and tucked them into her purse before leaving. Ethan's first reaction was suspicion. Was she stealing food? But then he remembered the tenderness in her eyes, the way she talked to that plant. Something told him this wasn't theft. It was something deeper. That evening, when Rosa clocked out, Ethan quietly followed her car down the old road that led out of town, unaware that what he'd discover next would change his life forever. Ethan's sleek black car followed Rosa's small, rusty one through the dimly lit streets. The city lights slowly faded as they entered an older neighborhood. The rain had begun to drizzle, and the windshield wipers moved in rhythm with his racing heartbeat. He kept his distance, careful not to be seen. After nearly 20 minutes, Rosa parked outside a small children's hospital. The kind of place most wealthy people never even noticed. The building looked old, its walls chipped, the signboard flickering weakly under the rain. Ethan frowned. What could she be doing here this late? He watched as Rosa got out of her car, holding the same cloth bag he had seen earlier. She walked inside with a determined but gentle pace. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then decided to follow her quietly. Inside the hospital, the smell of disinfectant filled the air. The hallways were dim, and a few nurses smiled tiredly as Rosa passed by. Ethan stayed far enough to not draw attention. Then, through a half-open door, he saw something that stopped him cold. Rosa sat beside a small hospital bed, holding the hand of a pale young girl. The girl was thin, her head bald from chemotherapy, but her smile, it was pure light. "Mom, you came," the girl said weakly. Rosa kissed her forehead. "Of course, my little angel. I brought soup and bread today. And look, I saved a fruit tart for you." The girl's eyes sparkled. "You're the best, Mama." Then Rosa turned and began distributing the rest of the food to other children in the ward. Some were too weak to eat, but when Rosa spoke to them, they smiled. She laughed with them, wiped their tears, and told funny stories. Ethan watched from the doorway, completely silent. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. He had thought she might be stealing food, but instead she was feeding sick children, spending her nights spreading kindness after spending her days scrubbing his floors. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something break inside him, not pain, not guilt, but realization. He whispered to himself, "She has nothing, and yet she gives everything." That night, as he sat alone in his luxury mansion, Ethan couldn't sleep. The image of Rosa's daughter, smiling despite her pain, haunted him and inspired him. The next morning, Ethan walked into his office, but the world looked different. The usual rush of meetings and business calls felt meaningless. He couldn't stop thinking about Rosa and her daughter, about the tiny hospital room, the flickering lights, the quiet courage of that poor woman who smiled through her pain. He sat at his desk, staring at his reflection in the glass window overlooking the city. All this luxury, and yet I've never done one thing that truly mattered, he thought. That afternoon, he called his private secretary. "Julia, I need you to find out everything about Rosa's daughter, her name, her condition, her hospital, everything. And don't tell anyone why." Within hours, Julia returned with a file. "Her name's Lily Fernandez, sir. She's 13, diagnosed with leukemia 2 years ago. The doctors say she needs an advanced treatment abroad, but Rosa couldn't afford it." Ethan closed his eyes. He didn't hesitate for a second. "Make the arrangements. Full treatment. Private jet, medical visa, expenses, everything under my name. But keep it anonymous." Julia blinked. "Anonymous, sir?" He nodded firmly. "I don't want her to feel she owes me anything. Just let her daughter live." Days later, Rosa received a call from the hospital. A wealthy donor had covered her daughter's treatment. Every cost, every bill, even their travel. She collapsed to her knees in shock, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Who would do something like this?" she whispered to the nurse. The nurse only smiled. Someone with a big heart. Rosa's daughter, Lily, began her treatment abroad. Months passed, and slowly her health improved. She regained her strength, her hair began to grow back, and her laughter returned bright and beautiful. Meanwhile, Ethan never told a soul. But every morning he found himself smiling when he saw the empty flower pot Rosa had once saved. The plant she'd cared for now stood tall and green in the kitchen window, blooming like new life. He finally understood kindness. Like that plant, only needed a bit of care to grow. And though Rosa didn't know it, her kindness had saved not just her daughter's life, but Ethan's heart too. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, Ethan stood in his garden, watering the very plant Rosa had once rescued. Its leaves were lush, its flowers a soft shade of pink. He smiled to himself. A small, genuine smile he hadn't worn in years. For months, he hadn't seen Rosa. She had taken leave to stay abroad while her daughter underwent treatment. But that morning, as he turned to head back inside, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Sir, Mr. Miller." Ethan turned and his heart skipped. There stood Rosa, her eyes filled with tears, and beside her, a little girl with short, growing hair and a smile brighter than the morning sun. "Lily," Ethan whispered softly, recognizing her from the hospital. The girl ran forward, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Mom said you love plants," she said shyly, handing it to him. Ethan took the flowers carefully, trying to keep his composure. "They're beautiful, thank you." Rosa wiped her eyes. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you. The doctors said an anonymous donor paid for everything, the surgery, the medicine, even the hospital stay. Whoever that person is, they saved my child's life. I owe them everything." Ethan swallowed hard. His voice was calm, but his heart trembled. "Rosa," he said gently, "sometimes the universe rewards kindness in mysterious ways." Her eyes searched his face, and in that instant she understood. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clasped her hands together. "It was you, wasn't it?" Ethan shook his head softly. "No, Rosa, it was you. You saved me. You showed me what real wealth looks like." For the first time, Rosa saw a softness in his eyes. The cold, distant man she once worked for was gone. In his place stood someone humble, changed. That day, Ethan announced something new. A charity foundation named Lily's Hope, dedicated to helping children from low-income families get medical care. Rosa became its first manager. Standing on the stage during the foundation's opening, Ethan looked at the crowd and said, "True wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by what you give. And sometimes, the richest souls wear the humblest clothes." As the audience applauded, Rosa looked at him with pride, and the plant in his mansion's window bloomed brighter than ever.